Nick Nurse. Oh. The Sixers finally got someone who fits multiple boxes. He's a guy who has 2 feet inside of the modern NBA. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that he is 2 feet inside of the NBA. You know, with Brett, the motion offense it doesn't make sense with your roster of J.J. Redick as your primary ball handler. Like, that was just never going to work. With Doc, you run a pick and roll is nice, but I need a little bit more than that. And I especially need secondary actions. I need off-ball actions, especially when you got a weapon like Tyrese Maxey and off-ball, only not to use him in the way that you could use him. I should have used Reggie Miller with the first step. The Pacers coach had no problem running plays with Reggie Miller. So I actually think that's the first dividend that you're going to see here. You're going to see that the coaching had a lot to do with the fact that Tyrese was in the same role and gave you a little bit better results, but he truly needed to be unleashed. And that's what Nick Nurse is going to do. That's what most coaches are going to do, to be brutally honest with you. You know, where one of the main contentions was about the democracy thing and all that other stuff, and it just got in the way of ever truly putting a good NBA offense together. That being said, Nick Nurse's offensive philosophy is a huge mystery, because this guy, his coaching history, and I'm going to get a video out with research, but basically he worked with Daryl Morey a decade plus ago with the Rockets D-League team. You know, a very short connection there. I personally, obviously when it comes to narratives and writing story articles, people are going to talk about it, but it's so far away that, I'll be brutally honest with you, among us basketball nerd heads, I think that a lot of our friends and colleagues in the Philly Sports Network, a lot of them are going to come out and say, that was way too long ago to be relevant, but at least it is something of a connection. When it came to the Toronto Raptors and the Nick Nurse offenses, watching them as an opponent, I was never displeased. I thought they did run modern stuff, but honestly, looking at it, there were limitations in Toronto's, obviously, but there were also construction. Like, we say they have wings, and they did have wings, but, you know, Siakam is at the top of the food chain there. OG Anunoby has become grossly overrated for God knows what reason, maybe because the whole league is starved, but he slightly, we'll call him tier B. And then Gary Trent Jr., the Norman Powell. So the Toronto talent gradually got worse over the years. You know, Fran VanVleet, 5'11", not really much of a defensive guard. You know, and that was one of the big reasons Maxey had success. You could pick on VanVleet in that pick and roll kind of thing. I saw pick and rolls in Toronto, and we'll go over pick and roll usage. Is it as big as Doc's? No, thankfully not. But for those who are like, ooh, don't get all the ball with the elbow and the nail, I think you're still going to see that. Number one, it's the most comfortable place for your best player. Number two, it generally does work. The big issue with the Sixers offense, and I need people to understand this, P.J. Tucker, Tobias Harris, you need to fix that. And that's an immediate problem staring you in the face. Like, the fact, think about it this way. In that Game 7, first half, before everything implodes, P.J. Tucker makes a couple of feeds, right? And Boston is still selling off. Why? Because P.J. Tucker isn't a volume guy. He's not a guy who, okay, he made 3 in a row. What if he makes 4 or 5 in a row? He doesn't have that mentality, nor does he have that ability. And the same thing with Tobias Harris. None of those guys are stretching the floor. Hitting 1.3 3-pointers a game is not stretching the floor. It's just not. I'm sorry. In 2023 NBA, the only floor stretchers we had were James Harden and Tyrese Maxey. And James Harden, you saw it in that series, he still thinks it's 2017 and he can get by people. You clearly can't, but you're also a great three-point shooter. You need to become more of an outside shooter. I need Nick Nurse to be able to sit down with James Harden if he was signed and be like, look, your driving game is done. You're going to have to be an outside shooter in order to be a scorer. In game 1 and game 4 that people like to talk about, game 1, James Harden takes 14 threes. In game 4, I think it was 10. That's who you are at this point in your career, James. You're an outside shooter. You're not an inside finisher guy. You're a three-point shooting guy. He's Chauncey Billups with handles. And that's still a great player. But I need him to accept, whether it's fair or not fair, whether you're bromishing or not, you're not going to get that underarm play anymore. You're just not. Just accept that. Accept that reality and make winning basketball plays for your team. But even if not, I do think that Tyrese can develop as a ball handler just by getting those situations. When he was with Joel Embiid, he averaged over 5 assists a game. Is that a great number? No, it's a tick up, especially for a third year. I would like to see it be 7 or 8 assists. And a lot of that is also going to depend, once again, what do you have on your flanks? The wing position in basketball is the same thing as that slot receiver position in football, your X, your Y, your boundary. Who are your flankers? Sure, that can't be Tobias and PJ. I guarantee you that now. I don't care how much you like him diving to the floor. He's a test man. He's not good enough to start. He's not. If you're trying to win a championship, if you're telling me that your goal is to win an NBA championship, you cannot be starting PJ Tucker. That's just not going to work. I'm sorry. It's not. Not only for us, but for 31 other NBA teams. I'm just keeping it a buck. The only reason Tucker was able to win in the whole thing with Giannis is because of Giannis. Let's be brutally blunt about that. PJ didn't do much to affect the outcome of that series. I'm sorry to say. In much the same way, Kevin Durant, obviously inefficient with the numbers, but Kevin Durant was still able to score in that series against the Nets. Obviously, if your foot is 1 foot shorter, situation totally changes, and we're not talking about this. But that's the point. He's just a test man. The Sixers won't be able to move him because of that. That contract is atrocious for a guy who's only played 15 minutes. But if you're going to have him, bring him off the bench, let him be the dive on the floor guy for the second unit. That's where guys like that typically belong. But he's not a starter. And then there's Tobias. Oh, Trooper Tobias. And when they're like, oh, he changed his role so many times because he never did good in any of the roles. Primary scoring option? No, not really. How about a secondary guy or a third guy? Nope. Even when he scores in a way where the ball basically, it ends up in a place where the ball is isolated, the ball is stuck. And even when it comes to that low post, mid, high post basketball, that's obviously the same area as Embiid. And you're not as good of a scorer as Embiid, and you're not that much, if at all, better of a playmaker than Embiid. So, when it comes to Tobias, you got to trade Tobias. Trade PJ if you can, but you probably can't. But just, at that point, just reduce PJ to what he really should be. You're looking for a wing starter. You've been looking for a wing starter ever since Daryl Morey came in. Basically, ever since Jimmy Butler left. And this is the true key to the situation. You lost Jimmy Butler, and you have not been able to come even remotely close to replacing Jimmy Butler since. Whether fans want to accept that or not, that's where the talent deficiency is. Oh, we changed everything. Yeah, you brought in worse players at the same position. You went from Danny Green, who is below average, and then you got PJ Tucker, who's even worse than that. Remember the Hollis Thompson and the Robert Covington days? The Sixers need to get themselves a guy at that spot. You know, Lewis King had that game against the Nets, right? Bring him up. You're at the point where you have to try somebody because your glut of horrible, below average wingmen just don't do the trick. I'm sorry, they just don't. It's the most crucial position, and I need to see us commit to the idea. We don't have cap. And Tobias isn't some great contract. So if it's going to take young players, they'll take young players. But you have to find a way to discover somebody at that small forward position. It's not Tobias, it's not PJ. You need to go on the discovery. Because the answer isn't immediately in front of you, but you have to find it. You at least have to try to find it. The good thing is that Nick Nurse is an experimental guy. He's a guy that loves to experiment. So, in terms of lineup experimentation, Nick is going to come in here with an open mind and he'll understand that we need a more vertical player at that position in order to contend. And he will not be opposed to, oh, you know what? Lewis King fits the bill, but he's 21. No, that's not what Nick Nurse is going to say. Nick Nurse is going to be like, you fit the bill? You go right in that lineup. And that's really big for the 76ers. Speaking of discovering people, discovering what Jaden Springer is, I can't believe I'm saying that with a positive face, but the way he got down Trae Young, I think is really exciting, and what Jaden Springer can be on the defensive end of the ball. At the very minimum, is he your Matisse Thybulle, or can he grow into something more? That's another thing that you want to discover. This is all about discovery. This is all about development. This is all about moving forward from what we could call the dead era of the process. And I think Nick Nurse is as good of a guy as anybody to move forward with. I don't know the offensive scheme in particular, but a report that I read said a spread offense. So if it is a spread offense, I'm looking for the Sixers to go and acquire more shooters in draft and free agency and stuff like that. Obviously, they don't have a pick yet, but what Daryl Morey probably is realizing is that with or without Harden, he needs to be creative. Being creative is plan A and B, not just plan B. Because this roster is very, very, very far away from contending for an NBA title. I'm just telling it like it is. And I don't even think I need to tell you like how it is. We saw how it is in Game 6 and Game 7. We're a long way away. But I think Nick Nurse is as good of a guy as anybody to lead us in the direction that we want to go. Six of the universe, more on this is going to come out later. Signing off.